Hey guys, welcome to today's video. So today I'm going to take you through my full workout for the day. I'm currently doing a 5-day split, and of those 5 sessions, 2 are push-pull sessions. Now it happens that today's session is going to be push and pull in the vertical plane. So it's going to be very focused on my lats as well as on my delts. You'll recognize some of the delt exercises from my previous video on my top 5 shoulder movements, but this will be from a little bit different perspective. As I go through the video, I'll share with you what I'm thinking about each rep of each set of each exercise. So basically the things that I'm keeping in mind as I execute, really trying to block everything external out and have an internal focus to really be able to forcefully contract muscle while in the most stable position possible to maximize the tension and the effect. Alright guys, so I've just pulled up to the gym, just parked, so it's about that time to get the vertical push-pull session started. Alright, let's go. So first up is an exercise that I frankly used to suck at and have managed to improve significantly over the years to great benefit. And that's a wide grip lat pull down. Now, what I'm constantly aware of while doing this exercise is the position of my shoulder blades. So at the top of the movement, I allow a full stretch of my lats and I allow my shoulders and shoulder blades to elevate. However, as soon as I'm about to begin the rep, my first movement is to retract and depress my shoulder blades and then begin to drive down with my elbows. As far down as I can, and then right at the bottom of the movement, trying to tuck my elbows in a little bit as if I'm aiming for the middle of my lower back with my elbows. Now, my elbows don't actually move inward very much, but with that intention, I am able to get maximal shortening of my lats. I hold that squeeze at the bottom usually for about a second, sometimes maybe even 2 seconds to get a maximal contraction out of my lats in that short position. And then I return to the starting position again, allowing my lats to stretch, full stretch, allowing my shoulders to elevate a bit, and then repeating. So as the weight increases or as I get more fatigued in the later sets, I may not get the full range of motion as I would get in the beginning of the set or in an earlier set, but I still try to maintain as much tension as I can through the range of motion that I'm able to get in those later sets. And sometimes I'll do a rest pause set or a drop set at the end just to get the most I can out of my lats on that exercise. So next up is a standing barbell overhead shoulder press. And it's a pretty challenging movement. You need to be sure that you have pretty good core strength and that you're very good at bracing your core because you want to be able to keep your spine neutral and not allow the weight to cause any hyperextension, particularly in your lower back as you execute the exercise. I tend to use a split stance for greater stability rather than a neutral stance with my feet shoulder width apart because I feel like using this split stance, I'm vastly more stable. I'm able to engage my core and stabilize my spine a lot better in this position. For safety, I always perform this exercise using a squat cage. This allows me to position the barriers at an appropriate level and allows me to pause briefly at the end of each rep so that I can make any minor adjustments that I need to before moving on to the next rep. So with the barbell overhead shoulder press, I tend to keep my elbows in a tucked position because it's a safer position for my shoulder joint as opposed to when they're flared out toward the side. And all the way through the movement, I'm really focused on maintaining my shoulder blades back and down even as I press upward with the bar. Cannot get to 10. Okay, so next up is a superset of a flat bar cable pull down or pull over, depending on how you want to look at it, combined with standing dumbbell lateral raises. I'll describe each of them individually, starting with the flat bar cable pull down. Here again, I'm really focused on initiating the movement with my lats by contracting from the stretched position right at the top by pulling my shoulder blades again back and down, so retracted and depressed. Now your lats insert on the humerus, which is the upper arm bone just outside of the armpit area. So what you should really be thinking about is driving from that point downwards. Keep your arms straight, drive down through your elbows until your lats are maximally shortened. Now in that shortened position, have the intention again of bringing your elbows to a point right in the middle of your lower back. Now obviously your elbows will not meet at that point, but that intention helps you with the sensation of maximally shortening your lats. Hold that squeeze in that shortened position for a brief moment, maybe a second or two, and then begin the eccentric in a very controlled manner while maintaining tension in the lats. And what I'm really thinking about is maintaining a lat spread all throughout the eccentric until I'm at the top of the movement, where I then allow my shoulder blades to elevate and get a full lat stretch before repeating the movement. Okay, now for the second part of the superset, the standing dumbbell lateral raises. For this movement, I stand with my feet roughly shoulder width apart and then have a slight tilt forward in my torso while maintaining a neutral spine. Now the reason for the forward torso tilt is to ensure that the medial delts are essentially on top facing the ceiling. Why? Because when using a dumbbell, the resistance that you are working against is the force of gravity, which is acting directly downward. And so you want to be able to exert force in a muscle that is pointing directly upward, so opposing the direction of action of gravity. So with this in mind, I initiate the movement by intending to pull my hands apart like I'm dragging my knuckles across the floor, and this intention is going to help me to maintain my shoulder blades back and down, as well as to maintain tension in my medial delts. I'll continue that movement until a point where my medial delts are maximally shortened, and that's usually before my upper arms are parallel to the floor, and that's fine. I pause right there at the top of the movement because that's the most difficult portion before beginning the eccentric portion of the movement. Again, throughout the eccentric, I'm focused on maintaining tension in my delts, and then I stop at a point where the dumbbells are still just outside of shoulder width to ensure that there still is some tension in my medial delts. Then repeat. Because I'm focused on continuing to improve my delts, there are a couple more delt exercises in the workout. So next up, again, is an overhead press, but this time seated using dumbbells. So the reason for the seated position for this exercise is I'm getting a little bit fatigued later in the workout, so I use the bench to provide some external stabilization rather than having to depend on my core stabilizers to execute the movement. As with the standing version, once I'm set up with my feet firmly planted on the floor and my back pressed into the bench, I check in with my shoulder blades to ensure that they're retracted and depressed, and essentially stay this way throughout the movement, so I really lock them down. Now I continue to drive upwards with my wrists stacked above my elbows, driving to the point where my front delts are maximally shortened, ending the movement where the dumbbells are still just outside of shoulder width to maintain tension in the front delts. However, this is the easiest portion of the movement, or the easiest position of the movement, and so I don't tend to spend very much time here. I then just initiate the eccentric portion of the movement in a very slow, controlled manner to ensure the tension remains in my front delt. I lower the dumbbells to about mouth level, pause right at the bottom of the movement when the dumbbells are at approximately mouth level, before initiating the next rep by driving upwards again, using of course the contractive force in my front delts. Getting back to some lateral raises again, and because, as I mentioned before, we're getting to the end of the workout and I'm pretty fatigued, at this point using a bench now for some external stabilization. So seated dumbbell lateral raises. No real variation from the standing version in terms of execution, so I still have a forward torso tilt to ensure that my medial delts are facing upward. But for the setup, I ensure that while sitting in the bench, my lower back or my hips are pressed into the back pad and my feet are firmly planted on the floor to provide some counterforce. Again, intending to drag my knuckles across the floor as I drive my hands apart at the start of the movement, continuing to drive upwards with my elbows upwards and outwards, and then ending at a position where my medial delts are maximally shortened. Again, this is going to be a little bit short of parallel for me. For some others, you may get to parallel, but for me, I stop short of parallel. I make sure to hold in this position for at least a second or so, because this is the most difficult part of the movement, and I want to challenge myself as much as possible to get the most I can out of the exercise. So pause there, and then begin the eccentric, maintaining tension in the medial delts until my hands are just outside of shoulder width. Again, not pausing here because this is the easy portion of the movement, but then just briefly stopping the motion and then initiate the next rep by pulling my hands apart and driving up with my elbows. So after about 10 reps, I'm really not able to execute within the full range of motion, and so I'll drop down and do a couple partial reps. Usually I'll try to get to 10, maybe even 12 partial reps at the end, just to get the most I can out of the exercise. Finally, wrapping up the session with some standing bent over barbell rows, which target the mid-back as well as the lats. And I tend to use a pronated or overhand grip for these because I feel it more in my back than in my biceps, as I would have if I used an underhand or supinated grip. So I stand bent over, slight bend in my knees, feet closer than shoulder width apart, and then my torso bent to about 45 degrees or tilted forward to about 45 degrees, again with a neutral spine, so head facing down. And what I think about is in the starting position when my arms are fully extended and my lats are experiencing full stretch, I think first about pulling my shoulder blades back and down. You see the theme. So pulling my shoulder blades back and then beginning to drive upwards. Again, thinking about driving through my elbows, continuing upward until my lats are maximally shortened. And in this position, tending to squeeze as hard as possible to get the maximal contraction I can out of my lats. You'll notice that I keep my elbows fairly tucked in as opposed to flared out, and this allows me to focus more tension in my lats than in my mid-back, which is really the area I'm trying to improve the most.
Could not get that last right. Alright, that's it. It's a wrap. Vertical push-pull session, done.
So there you have it, guys. The vertical push-pull session for the day is complete. It's in the books. If you enjoyed the video, if you found the information beneficial, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see any of the other workouts in my current split, be sure to leave a comment below and let me know. If you have any questions on the exercises performed or how I set up or how I execute them, again, be sure to leave a comment. And as always, guys, be sure to subscribe to receive notifications for future Jawaiian accent delivered fitness related information. But until the next video, guys, aloha.